Welcome and good evening. Welcome to all of our viewers to Represent STL, where we bring the best of St. Louis together to engage in creative conversation that builds bridges to a stronger and better community. I'm your host and moderator tonight, Adina Varner. I am the Director of Learning and Community Engagement at the Repertory Theater of St. Louis, which sits on the ancestral grounds of the Illini Confederacy, the Missouri, and the Osage peoples, and we honor the ancestral legacies of the Native people of the land on which we stand. And tonight I am joined with an amazing panel, truly some of St. Louis's shining stars, and I will introduce them in just a moment. But first, as we gather, we have to acknowledge our viewership and say hello to you. We see you. And so feel free to engage with the chat. We'll be sure to monitor our chat lines and keep you all integrated in this conversation. Everybody, tonight is the final episode of this season's Represent STL. And tonight we are focusing on the topic from surviving to thriving. Surviving, thriving. It's been some challenges over the past few years. I think we all can agree to that. But today we are going to talk about how we're working through them and what the horizon looks like for us. And so we have with us Vanessa Cooksey, the president of the Regional Arts Commission. We've got Dominic Yansky, who is the director of marketing from Forest Park Forever. We have Shonda Ambers Phillips, the executive director of equity, diversity, and inclusion for Kirkwood Schools, and Bailey Pasha, the individual gifts manager for Metro Theater Company here in St. Louis. Welcome, panelists.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are going to hop right in because they are ready to talk. And so while we table set, I just want to check the pulse with all of our panelists and feel free to chime in. You all tell us about the work that you are most connected to at this moment at your institution. What's the most meaningful thing that you've set your hands to? And what's something that you've learned over the past few years? It can be professional, it can also be personal. I think sometimes those lines blend. But what's most meaningful for you in your work? And then tell us a lesson, something that you've learned. Anybody can go.
That was a lot of questions. So I'm trying to figure out where to begin. So I will, I guess, jump in there. Again, as you said, I'm Dr. Shonda Ambers Phillips, and currently I'm the Executive Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion in Kirkwood School District. And so I think something meaningful that I'm working on is I lead a group called the Educational Equity Task Force. And this group is made up of various different stakeholders, about 65 members or so, of community members, staff members, students, families, parents, and we really look at examining educational inequity and equity in our system. So who is basically disproportionately impacted by some of the policies, practices, and procedures that we have in place, and who's benefiting from them. And so I think for me, having worked in several school districts in the St. Louis County area, I see that all districts are not necessarily created equal. When you think about resources, think about funding, and thinking about the educational experience that students actually receive. And so we want to make sure as much as we possibly can that we reduce barriers. And so the work of this group, and then also our strategic plan, we have three priority areas that really look to address some of the inequities. So opportunities and access for advanced placement classes, gifted classes, just pathways for students to be able to access whatever they desire to reach their full potential. We're also looking at staffing because that's extremely important that the students see people that look like them, and that we're auditing our policies, practices, and procedures, because as a school district, that's how we do business, right? And so in some ways, we do have to really interrupt some of the systems that we have in place and possibly create new structures and systems to be able to better serve students, families, and our overall community. So I'll stop there and let other people jump in and say what they're working on as well.
That's awesome, Shonda. Thank you. Yeah, Vanessa, Dominic, either of you, go ahead, hop in.
All right, I'll jump in. So I'm Director of Marketing and Communications at Forest Park Forever, where I just joined this year after a long time at Webster University. So some of the exciting things I'm working on is the organization at Forest Park is doing a lot more community engagement as it plots kind of changes in the park and going forward. So I'm kind of jumping into that process. Some things, a lot of people love Forest Park and kind of view it as a civic treasure and pride and stuff, but we know that some people don't, or some people, don't visit or don't have access. So we've had a visitor study going on that examines people who do go to the park a lot, people from zip codes that maybe are underrepresented at the park. And so having them go out and explore the park and tell us what they see and what's missing and what would make it more inviting to them or to others in their community. And so specifically, like really quickly, Forest Park is sort of managed by a master plan that's agreed with the city. And so two parts of that are coming in the next few years is like a redesign of the Steinberg ice rink, maybe roller, maybe all kinds of other activities. And that's involved a lot of community outreach. And then something kind of around the bend, also part of the master plan is an active recreation that we will bring basketball courts to the park eventually. And that's kind of in the stages of about to do community engagement, kind of with the same group that's helped us with community engagement for Steinberg. So those are some exciting things that I'm lucky to join just as they're getting underway. And what have I learned, I guess, both here and at Webster over the last few years is just keep talking, keep the conversations going. When you're in a group or in an organization, you think you've been over all the ideas or you've said it before, but you've got to keep talking and keep bringing these things up and keep reaching out to people, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know who wasn't there for the last conversation and who might feel more welcome to join in this time.
I'm happy to hop in next. Thank you so much for this invitation. It is an honor to be here. I have the privilege of leading the largest public funder of the arts in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. And what we are working on is reimagining our work. We get 98% of our revenue from hotel motel sales tax in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. So in 2019, we had $7 million in revenue. In 2020, it was just over 3. So to go from here to here from a revenue perspective was significant. I joined the organization in November of 2020. And so I like to describe my experience. I feel like I run a 37-year-old startup. We were founded in 1985. And when you have significant change that happens that quickly, there's a lot of rebuilding to do. And we are looking very strategically, guided by the strategic plan that we launched in 2020, how can we make the biggest difference for our arts organizations and the artists who make St. Louis a great place to live, work, and play? St. Louis really is an arts town. We think of ourselves as a sports town, but we have more theaters per capita than cities twice our size, hundreds of arts and culture organizations that make this city special. And RAC, I like to think of ourselves as the Ameren of the arts and culture community. When the electric is on, everything's good, but when it's off, you can really feel it, right? And so we are just really thoughtful about how we can help build the capacity of our artists and arts organizations. And what has been most meaningful to me over the last 2 years in particular is the power of creativity, and how we have come together, how we have solved problems. And what I'd say for me right now, the lesson that I've learned is really anything is possible. We have been able to get our work done on platforms like these, working remote, working with masks, without masks, things that we didn't even think were possible 3 years ago. we're doing today. And, for all of the challenges that we've experienced from the pandemic, there's been a lot of good, a lot of recognition that we have more in common than not, an acknowledgement that we have to do this together. Teamwork makes the dream work. And so I'm just excited about how we have shifted and opened ourselves to new possibilities and doing work differently, in this new time and space.
Thank you so much, Vanessa.
Thanks, Vanessa. So I am Bailey Paja, and I am at Metro Theater Company as the individual support and event manager. And I actually just started very recently, so I'm still kind of, absorbing everything that Metro Theater Company is and what my part is in this organization. It's a small organization. We're very close. Everyone's ideas are heard, and I'm extremely lucky to be a part of this organization at this time. For about 12 years, I was a teaching artist, and my primary job was to, teach kids how to sing and dance. And it was fulfilling and wonderful and beautiful, but something, kept tugging at me that was kind of like, I want to do more. I don't want to just teach kids how to sing and dance, even though it is fantastic. Musical theater person degree myself. That's what I've built my life on so far. But so I guess enter Metro Theater Company, and it's an institution that believes that learning through the arts provides a tool for, lifelong learning and enhances social emotional development. And that's everything that I wanted to do more of while I was teaching these tiny humans how to sing and dance. And honestly, there just wasn't time because, you're trying to get these little ones ready for this production. But at Metro, our job, we aren't an academy, we bring theater to young audiences and also bring drama to schools and learning through the arts. And it's just a really lovely place to be. But a lesson I kind of learned throughout that kind of journey is that, you don't, that no matter where you are in your career or within your organization, there's always room to dream and grow and continue your education to support exactly what you want. I guess you don't have to settle, and you can be bold, and you can prove to others that you are exactly where you need to be. So I'm holding on to that and loving Metro and loving their support as around me, and excited to do great work as we keep going.
Thank you, Bailey. You all kind of spoke about this openness to change and this creative approach to problem solving, and that we're in this space of reimagining and retooling and rethinking. And so a couple of you did mention it, specifically you, Vanessa, and I want to just kind of pull at the root of that a little bit more when you spoke about in particular what you've been able to accomplish over the past 2 or 3 years that you never would have even thought possible before. So this kind of sense of openness. The pandemic forced us to change, right? We didn't have a choice. And so it is interesting to kind of use this time as leverage in essence, to really be able to be about meaningful change that just 2-3 years ago seemed impossible. The way we've been able to dream and collaborate and again, creatively problem solve, we just didn't have that platform, that space before. And so I'm curious to hear you all really talk a little bit more about, what are we doing now that just wasn't even a thought before? How are we approaching our work now that wasn't possible, or no one had an ear to hear it before, right? Like new ideas are like, yes, we want new ideas now, but there was a time when those ideas may not have been welcomed. And so I'm curious to hear where those shifts are specifically in your work and your institutions. And I do love that we've got some cross-sector conversations happening here. So I would just love to hear anything in particular that may have been a closed door that is now open.
I'm happy to start, particularly as the largest public funder of the arts, with an amazing funding source of hotel motel sales tax. The Regional Arts Commission did not have to think about fund development. Our funds were set, and for more than 15 years, we experienced growth in that revenue of 2.63%. So for those of you watching, and certainly for my panelists who are leading and working in nonprofit organizations, you know, when you have to raise those dollars, you got to keep and then add to. RAC was very fortunate where our revenue just kept growing and then it fell off. And our recovery is years long. And it's not like hotel motel was able to come back. It still hasn't come back at pre-pandemic levels. It might be another 3 to 5 years from now. And when RAC is hurting, the sector is hurting because we provide general operating support, program support, grants for artists. And over the last 2 years, RAC has had to say, we need to diversify our revenue. We can't afford to only have one source of revenue. And what makes that a unique and creative, a problem that we have to solve creatively, is that we don't want to do it in competition with our grantees, right? So when we're asking for money, it's likely from art supporters who are also supporting arts organizations and artists. And so we have to think more broadly about what services does RAC offer that we could potentially earn revenue from, because all of these dollars that we earn, we then turn into grants for arts organizations and artists. And so the thing that excites me most about needing to be creative in this space is we get to serve as role models, right? Because our arts organizations and arts and culture organizations are having to think broadly about fundraising, right? And so where we have wins and successes, we can share that roadmap, not only through the direct grant support, but say, hey, here's a new source that we found. And yeah, RAC never had to ask for money. Now we're having to ask, and we're having to do it carefully. So for the benefit of the sector. So it's a unique and creative time for us in this space.
Yeah, that's good. I know that is something that we at the Rep are experiencing, Vanessa, just diversifying. And I see you, Bailey, shaking your head. Yeah, is there anything you want to add to that?
I guess just it's interesting because when you're talking about funding and individuals and corporations, you know, as we know, the world shut down. We weren't sure of where revenue was coming from. And anybody in the entire world, they were like, wait a second, my everything is shut down. Will my bank account be okay? So it's really trying to be meaningful and very tactful when we're talking to our donors, our corporations, you know, people like you at RAC, Vanessa, and figuring out what is truly, you know, a need and how are we gonna fund it. So it's, you know, it's just, like I said, being tactful and figuring out where that next revenue stream is going to come from. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Anybody else want to share
I would
about?
say from a school district perspective, I think for us, the pandemic was really hard for educators. I'm sure it was hard for healthcare workers and other industries as well. But for educators, it was really challenging. And there were some additional things I think also were unique for our actual kind of sector than other different areas. Because we had to go from virtual learning to person. In some schools, in some districts, it was a hybrid of both of those things. We were really asking teachers to do a whole lot. And when the kids were at home learning, a lot of times teachers had their own children that they were also trying to educate and help support as well. And so just transitioning back and the safety protocols. There's so many other things happening in education. Think about some of the legislation and the Parents' Bill of Rights and some of the other pieces that we had happen that caused educators to have like this trifecta of things that they were really focusing on. I will say that we operated more as a collaborative unit. I think we've always been collaborative, but I think also school districts are a little bit competitive because of rankings. And so in some ways we do act as silos. And so in this district, we worry about those students. But of course, this impacted all of the students in the state of Missouri, nationally and from a global perspective. And so I think I saw us not only collaborate more with other school districts, with private, parochial, independent schools, charter schools, public schools, all were grappling with the same issue. But I also think that we looked outside of our systems more intentionally with businesses and nonprofits and religious sectors, because of course these are all of our children, right? And so we really looked to the community to really help us to better meet the needs of kids. And so that collaboration has, I'm happy to say, continued. And I know we are still in the midst of the pandemic. We haven't actually gotten out of it yet, but we are still collaborating. And I certainly think that's better for everyone.
Yeah, I was thinking there's a lot of different ways to go with this answer, but how each of you touched on collaboration, and just as much as the Zoom world has been tough, it has made some pieces of collaboration or connection just easier, or just taking away some excuses or barriers not to do it. I've learned just in my Forest Park Forever raises funds and partners with the city to maintain and restore Forest Park, and for those who are new to St. Louis or new within the last 10 to 15 years, it actually started because the park was in really terrible shape, and so people wanted to restore it. And so it feels like for the most part that is done, and now there's a level of maintenance, and it's in a nice place, but so it's also the home for so many cultural institutions, and it's great to see the collaboration and support of kind of lifting everyone up, and in some ways they're signature places within the city that are connected to their own whether arts or theater or history and things like that. But it's just great. I feel like there's that ability now to more quickly and seamlessly collaborate and help support each other. And just one area too is just social media, which can be so toxic in some ways, but also it provides platforms where like institutions can help pat each other on the back, filter out the noise, lift each other up, and make people happy, give people the views into the institutions and activities and arts that they want to see. So that's kind of what I've seen for the past few years.
Yeah, I agree. I think the spirit of collaboration is strong, and I hope that continues and that we don't forget over the next few years as we continue to emerge. When I look at you all, and I don't know if I've really registered this before, but just in listening to you all introduce yourselves and your work and talk about what you've kind of set your hands to, I'm realizing that we're all new. We are all relatively new to our roles. Shonda, you are we're kind of in that toggle space of like leaving a space and going into a new role. And so it is very interesting also that the pandemic has yielded this unique opportunity for shifts in leadership. Several institutions and industries in our region have had those changes in leadership. And so I am curious about hiring practices. Shonda, you lifted this too. What are folks looking for? What are you looking for? How have your hiring practices evolved over the past few years? Everybody is looking for talent. I mean, there's a hiring sign on every business that you may walk into. Everybody is looking for somebody. And so I'm curious to hear for your institutions in particular, how have hiring practices evolved? Are there new manuals? Are there new job descriptions? Are there new things that you're offering candidates that maybe you weren't offering in the past? Are there new skills you're looking for? So I'm just curious to hear about that, because I do know that some of our college students like to tune into these segments and they want to make themselves as competitive as possible. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I can start for Metro Theater. You know, coming straight off the job search and landing at Metro Theater Company, we recently hired 2 new staff members. So we have been the type of person, I guess, that we're looking for hasn't really changed much. We are always looking for people who are creative and adaptable thinkers and who are inquisitive and very thoughtful humans. We also do phenomenal work evaluating equity. So we've removed all education requirements from our job postings, which I thought was really interesting because, I mean, we know that everyone has a wide range of experiences that doesn't exactly come from a degree. And we know that degrees aren't attainable for all. What else? We list all of our salaries in our job postings so that we're very transparent with our salary. We don't want anyone to come in, go through the interview process, and then be surprised by what we're offering. Something that I found that Metro Theater Company does that I haven't seen before is that instead of asking for a traditional cover letter, we ask candidates to express themselves in whatever way that they seem fit. So that might be a video or a PowerPoint or, you know, just recording them speaking, which has been really lovely. And a few people that have applied since I've been there have done that. I just wrote the standard cover letter because I'm old school, but I thought that was really creative, and you really got to know the candidate a lot better. And we also ask for them to provide their philosophy on equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. So because that's something that's very important to Metro Theater companies. We want to make sure that they are a good culture fit. And, well, not only that they're a good culture fit, but that they can also bring something to our current culture. So they aren't just, you know, a cookie cutter version of one of us.
That's awesome. RAC is doing something similar. I'll start with the baseline things that we did and end with the thing that I'm most excited about. Because of our financial situation, we had significant displacements in 2020. And so we are rebuilding our team and we'll be doing some hiring this year. We did some last year. So it's good to see the team growing again. But before we decided to bring folks on, we made sure that we had our job descriptions rated and graded by CBiz so that the job pays what the market pays. I know I have a significant background in corporate prior to leading RAC, and so it was important to me. Sometimes I think we have an expectation that because it's nonprofit, we're not supposed to pay talent what they're worth. Well, I completely disagree with that. You know, what does the job pay in the market? And so we took the time to make sure that we were being competitive from that perspective and not be concerned about what your salary was, you know, prior to the job. It's like, this is what the job pays in the marketplace. The second thing we did was we're very intentional about upgrading our benefits. We offer many benefits on day one, from PTO to holidays. You know, we expect our talent to come in and contribute on day one. So why make them wait for benefits, you know, 60, 90, however many days. We also distinguished and put a lot of time and energy around wellness, employee wellness, from offering EAP, fully paid benefits, but also distinguishing wellness days and caregiving days, because sometimes if you're not feeling well, we want you to stay home. Don't come to work when you're sick. And that is one thing I will say we have done much better about in this pandemic, is not making people come to work when they're sick. But what if you're caring for a parent, family member, partner, child? You know, you might not be sick. So we have caregiver days, wellness days to support our team members in that. But the thing that I'm most proud of is we've spent a lot of time talking about our culture. And everything that we do, from recruiting, retention, development of our talent, really focuses on our culture. And our culture is defined, or what we want you to experience when you engage with RAC is a culture that is creative. And we took the time to define that word, both individual behaviors, institutional behaviors, and team-based behaviors, and what that looks like. And I'll share them real quickly. The C in creative is for connected, R is for respectful, E is for excellent, A is for accountable, T is for trusted, I is for inclusive, V is for valued, and E is for enjoyable. And we've been very intentional. We have full day professional development where the whole team gets together and we dig into this stuff, and we are very clear that this is what we want everyone to experience inside and out when they are engaged with REC. And it's a joy to be here now. And I'm just super excited in the time that we're committing to defining and living our values and our culture. It's paying off dividends.
That's awesome, Vanessa. I want that acronym, creative. I'm going to use that. I'm going to have to text you to get that one. I love that. I think that what really resonated with me was trusted, because in the midst of all of this change, it's been challenging for folks to still feel like they're valued and trusted, and that they can do the work potentially in a different format with using different tools, and just knowing that they've got some sense of job security and that their team values them, loves them, trusts them. So I appreciate that. Shonda, I saw you unmuted. I didn't want to move
Yes.
on.
I'll say for us, we have really looked at creating standard operating procedures for equity in the interview process, because of course we realized that interviews were certainly happening different, throughout all of our buildings, and we wanted to make sure that we had some standard operating procedures. Additionally, we certainly were intentional about asking questions around diversity, equity, inclusion to our candidates, because that is an expectation. We want people to come in with a certain level of cultural competence, to understand and have an understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion, because our students and our families are all very different. And so for them to be able to have some experiences with diverse groups, and to be able to understand how to meet the needs of all of our students is really important. Not only with the hiring, we kind of looked at in education, there are more people who are actually leaving education that are entering teaching education programs. And so I know this is a challenge for other, sectors and different levels of industry. But for us, if we don't have teachers, then people who have school-age children have no place to send them to be able to go to those other jobs, right? And so a requirement is that people must love kids. I say that all the time. That's the one thing that, we can offer professional development. We can certainly help people if it is a matter of skill to provide them with the necessary tools to be successful. But if it's will, or if they just don't have relationships with kids, then that's going to be something that we can't give to you. It has to be something that is intrinsic. And so that is just absolutely kind of a non-negotiable. We are trying to encourage more people to enter the field of education. So whether that is the students that are actually in our districts, in our buildings, through Grow Your Own programs, or looking at individuals who maybe are paraprofessionals to see if they want to continue their degree and go on and get a 4-year degree if they have already mastered 2 years right now and they're really good with students. Another thing is just the retention piece. We want to make sure that we're retaining the students and the teachers that we have in place, because that's, of course, how you increase your diversity. That's how you grow your numbers. And so trying to be as supportive as we possibly can for the teachers. And I think Vanessa kind of hit on it really well. For us, we are focused on not only wellness, but also a sense of belonging. Looking at our culture and climate, trying to understand, do people feel like they are not only physically, but psychologically safe in their spaces? Can they show up authentically as themselves? Do they feel like they have support? And do they feel valued and respected and seen and heard? And so all of those things are really, really, really important in terms of getting people to not only love what they do, but want to continue to do it there within your district. And so those are just a couple of things that I would say. I know from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, so at the state level, they have also kind of earmarked some funds for not only retention pieces for grants, but also grow your own. And so we just have to figure out how we can, you know, attract more people to education and for them to stay there and see this as a really phenomenal career, which I absolutely love. So.
I just wanted to share one quick thing and more as an acknowledgement of this great work. This stuff takes time and a lot of truth. And as leaders of organizations, leaders within organizations, we have to be able to give ourselves grace when we commit to going in a new direction, whether it's adopting a new technology or living a new value. So mistakes will be made, misunderstandings will happen, miscommunications will happen, you know, failures will happen, and we just have to keep after it, you know, and that's something that I think is the intersection of technology and this, you know, short narrative storytelling news cycle and how we share information really quick. Relationships aren't quick. And often what we're doing is relationship building, and that's what takes time and truth. And I just am excited, you know, to hear the work of this panel and just want to reinforce that this stuff is hard, it's fun, it's great, but it does take time.
And nurturing too, you know, building them and then nurturing them as you go.
Yes, and thank you for lifting that, because I think, you know, once we get past the buzzwords and the trends, we have to think about sustainability, right? And one of the things that we've experienced even at the Rep is, you know, we just, to your point, Vanessa, sometimes we're just firing, right? We're just making choices. And then we sit back and we say, how did we do that? Because we didn't take the time to build the right system. We were just responding versus trying to systematize our responses, right? And so I think you are hitting it on the head that it takes time and intentionality. Write it down. What was the process? What did you use? When did you pull that trigger? You know, really thinking thoughtfully so that in perpetuity, you know, those that come behind us have a roadmap. Thank you so much for lifting that. I am curious about that sense of expansion and growth and making it tangible and reasonable. I want to hang there for a minute and talk about capacity. I can't remember who lifted the idea about capacity building, and sometimes it feels like it's a bit much. We're doing so many things, and we may have small shops and not a ton of human resources. And so I'm curious to hear about sustainable growth and capacity building in the work that you all are doing. You know, we have a joke on my team where we talk about, you know, this is version 1. This is, or we'll say, you know, let's only take 12 credits this semester. Let's not take 18 credits. So I love to hear what you all are trying to do to just kind of balance the scales and realize that, you know, if all goes well, tomorrow will come. There will be another day. Just want to hear your thoughts on capacity and not burning ourselves out and staying fresh and inspired about our work.
So I'll jump in and just say you have to share the love and you have to share the load. So I think part of it is not feeling like you have to own all of this work together. So initially we talked a lot about collaboration, and I tend to lean on others to be able to support in the work that I'm doing, and vice versa. So I think, again, that's that collaborative piece. But you really kind of spoke to it as well in terms of making sure that when you are making progress, understand that, you know, some of these things do take time, and it's a marathon, right? It's a journey. So you have to understand and celebrate the small successes that you have along the way as a part of the entire work that you're doing, and you understand where you want to go. But knowing that there are levels to probably getting there, and that it doesn't have to be done alone. And so I think that, you know, once you develop some structures and systems to be able to put those in place and to be able to write those down so you can replicate that later on and you can share with other people. You know, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. I talked about that collaboration piece. If there's something that I'm doing in a school district and someone else from another school district calls and say, hey, can you help? I give it all to them, right? Absolutely, I can help you. I can support you. Why should someone else have to start from ground zero? And so I think that we have to phone our friends and we have to reach out to others because there are some best practices of things that we might be just at the entry point of trying to kind of do and change in our systems that other people might be further along the journey. So reach out to those individuals. Share the love, share the load within your own organization to be able to help that work take place. And so I think those are some of the things that I would probably say have helped me.
Yeah, that's interesting. That reminds me, one of the things I think, I mean, Forest Park Forever is baked in as a very collaborative organization. So you asked earlier about what, traits you need or job applicants need. And definitely, if you aren't into collaboration and discussing things, not just being in your own little area where you think you're just going to get all your work done. Collaboration is a big part of it. Sorry, now the kids have come in. But yeah, sharing the best practices elsewhere. Like we just had the Central Park Conservancy just held it's Urban Parks Roundtable with participants from around the U.S., but kind of co-hosted by Forest Park Forever, Great Rivers Greenway, Tower Grove Park, and the Gateway Arch Foundation. And just so the value of sharing and kind of the theme for this particular roundtable was equity in urban parks, and the value of everyone being together, talking, sharing their practices, sharing because this is probably common in nonprofits overall, but especially with parks, you talk about, okay, we can't be absolutely everything. Like you still have to focus on the mission and kind of not be stretched too far. And just being with others who are going through that same experience can help kind of ground you and bring you back to, okay, remember it's, let's all stay sane and stay within our capacity too, so that we don't all burn out.
I think it's interesting for Metro Theater Company. We are coming up on our 50th anniversary starting in July. So coming out of a pandemic, coming out of what was the worst of it, we are entering a big season. So we have 4 shows, we have 2 fundraisers, and then on top of all of that, we are offering a free fall family festival in Grand Square. So we are leaning on all of those partners. We can't put on a free fall family festival for thousands of people who have supported us over the last 50 years without leaning on those different organizations. And so I shouldn't say surprisingly, because St. Louis is an amazing town with some amazing arts organizations that we are working to partner with. But it's amazing. You send an email. They don't know me yet. They don't know me from Metro. Send an email, say, hey, we're doing this thing. Do you want to be a part of it? And every single one so far has said yes. And that is something special. It's not just going to fall all on me, the events manager, to make the thing happen. I'm getting to have those conversations with other learning and engagement coordinators. I'm having conversations with other events professionals around the city, and just taking the time to learn from them and grow with them and create something beautiful for our city. That will be really exciting.
My mom, when I was growing up, she said the reward for good work is more work. And so I think when I think about what is happening at RAC, something that we're doing to ensure that our capacity, because there's a distinct difference between capability and capacity. We can do all things, but can we do all things, right? And so we, on a routine basis, weekly, monthly, and quarterly, look at the goals we set for the year. And sometimes we have to acknowledge we're not going to get that done this year. We're going to have to move that to 2023. Some stuff we're moving to 2025 We set out with every good intention of getting that done in this 12 months. But I don't know about y'all, but I'm like, it's already June. And I'm not out here goofing off either. It's like, where is the time going? And so being honest about and being able to check in and say, we need to move this to another time frame is so important for our managing our capacity and ensuring our sustainability and going back to our stakeholders and keeping them informed. And that's something else that I think is part and parcel to sustainability is communication and transparency. You know, as a team, as an individual, we're managing our capability against our capacity. And that changes, you know, with things that are both in our control and outside of our control.
That's good, Vanessa. Thank you. And I think that sense of managing our capacity and really focusing on a sustainable future, that is what allows us to thrive, right? That's how we shift from just surviving and just firing and just making decisions to actually being strategic and systematic and moving from that space of just surviving to really being able to thrive. And when we think about thriving in particular, you all talked a little bit about cultural competency. You talked a little bit about equity. I think everybody has talked about equity. A few of you have talked about listening to your constituency a little bit more with Forest Park Forever and really trying to go out and talk to folks and engage with folks that maybe, you know, that zip code is underrepresented at the park and how they engage with the park. So there's listening that's happening. I'm curious, there's a question from the chat from Ms. Hana Sharif. And she says, can you all speak to the role advocacy plays in your ability to move into that modality of thriving? So we've talked a little bit about equity and sustainability and things like that. I mean, I am curious about advocacy and where that shows up in your work. And I think we just lost Vanessa, but I'm sure she'll make her way back. So you guys can hold down the fort. Shonda, if you're talking, you're muted.
No, I was trying to see if they wanted me to jump in there. So advocacy for me, I think it's just part of that is just having conversations. I think we have to be courageous and we have to talk about things more. Sometimes I think, especially when I think about diversity, equity, inclusion, so whether it's race, whether it's LGBTQIA populations, whether it's students with disabilities, whether it's anything that you could see as, you know, any difference that might make a difference is kind of how I think about diversity. Sometimes people are afraid to have those conversations. I'm not sure why, if it's just fear or if it's because of mindsets or changing behaviors. But I think part of my advocacy is just really raising awareness, having these courageous conversations. I try to make sure as much as I possibly can that I look at things through the lens of equity, that I think about like who's missing from the conversation, who's missing from, if we're talking about the arts, and I am a consumer of arts. I love, you know, the theater. I love plays. Vanessa, I don't even know if you remember, but I just saw you at a concert and bumped into you with a friend. So I am a consumer of all of these things, but I also realize that there are barriers to access. And so use your voice, figure out who is able to tap into these experiences, right? And who's missing. And then be intentional about finding ways to include individuals and reduce those barriers. And so again, that's just a big part of my advocacy. I also serve on the Forward Through Ferguson Racial Equity, the Community Governance Board. And so there's so many organizations, whether it's Forward Through Ferguson, whether it's NCCJ St. Louis, the Educational Equity of St. Louis, you know, Diversity Awareness Partnership, Educational Equity Consultants. If you just Google, like there's so many organizations here that are working to advance equity in our region. Join one. I mean, learn more, act however that looks like for you. But I think advocacy is acting from whatever space or place you hold, whether it's in the community that you live in, whether it's the place that you work, whether it's where you play, you know, making a difference however you can. Just showing up, I think, is how you can advocate.
I will share a couple of things. Our strategic plan, the title of it is Advocate Catalyst Partner. That is who the community expects RAC to be and what we're living into. In addition, one of my colleagues, Nicole Belford, is actually at the county council meeting right now, advocating for American Rescue Plan Act funds for the arts and culture sector. And that has been fueled by the coming together of over 111 arts organizations saying that our sector matters in this community and we need relief. We've been impacted significantly. And so I like to think about advocacy as a three-legged stool, and each leg represents the vision, the mission, and the metrics, right? And so what is it that we're trying to achieve? It's a full creative life for every St. Louisan, right? But you can't, well, you can, but it is better to have a conversation around what you're advocating for when you can measure the impact and the value of what the coalition is bringing. For this arts and culture sector in this region, it's $600 million in state and government revenue, 19,000 jobs, 15,000 working artists. And that's hard to ignore, right? And we're in the top 10 in terms of creative experiences for the people that live in St. Louis and come to visit St. Louis. So it's the vision, what can our community be and do when we come together? It's the mission, how our organizations come together, and the metrics that really speak to the impact of that are central to RAC's advocacy work.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you so much for lending your voice to that. I know our time is drawing nigh, and so I just want to close with a thought that centers joy and hope. As we are, I hope, finding a new space. I'm hesitant to say that we're finished, but we are, I think, in a space where we at least understand and understand not just the pandemic, but understand that so much of our day-to-day life is new and it has to be adaptive. And so I find that I've had to personally reassess what brings me joy and hope in my work because so much has shifted. There are days when I feel like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a degree in this. And so realigning myself with the values and things that matter the most to me, that's what keeps me doing what I do. And so I'm curious to hear from you all. What are you most hopeful about? Where do you see greatest potential? What is the joy that you're holding on to that you may be activating in a new way? But just share with us as we close those things, the things that are bringing you hope and joy, and things you may be excited about to see come into fruition.
I, for one, am very excited that live theater is back, as also a consumer of the arts and, now working for an organization where our primary goal is to provide theater for young audiences, and thinking back to the very beginning of the pandemic, I was a director of musical theater department at Dayspring Arts and Academy. And my job was to watch over these 13 teachers and these 255 children that I had in my department. Well, when everything went dark, we of course went online like many other organizations, and just watching the bright shining light just kind of start to dim from these students' eyes, when they couldn't be in person, when they couldn't do their final performance of the year, all of those things, really you just hold on to those. And so now being at Metro Theater, I get to walk into a production and see children's faces light up with excitement. Some of these children haven't even been to a theater, had the opportunity. They've been stuck in their houses for the last 2 years. So the fact that we can bring such beautiful joy and watch them experience that sort of disbelief, and let them forget and let them experience and grow and feel and all of these other things, I really hold on to that. And anytime anything gets tough or anything, I just think of those little small humans' faces, and just think of that bright light, that what we are providing is good and it will continue to be good no matter what.
I feel very lucky and spoiled even that I'm work in a park, so I see joy every day in so many different ways, from the variety accessible playground that's outside our offices to people who are exercising, or the handball crew that's been a community playing handball for decades, birders, everything. So it's really been reaffirming to me. Just to see, we're in such divisive times in many ways, but to see people coming together and enjoying a place that's in common and that's accessible, and especially the children in the park. We have this nature playscape that's all kind of a natural playground, and very much about encouraging experiential learning and exploration. And there was an 80-year-old woman from a local church who said, "We saw this and we just thought it was so great. Can you come talk about it?" And so I came in and talked to them about it. And they said, we tutor kids in city schools, or we did before the pandemic. And this just sounds great what you're doing, because our educational outreach there it's open to all schools, but they focus on, connections with St. Louis public schools and field trips there. And so I was there today and taking pictures, and this little girl said, "Why are you taking pictures?" And I said, "Well, because people want to make this possible, and they want to see how people like you enjoy it, and she just had this great conversation, and then she went back and played in the sand, And so that scenes like that give me daily joy and give me hope and keep me moving and wanting to do more.
I'm excited that St. Louis is growing and changing. And I'm grateful for the arts, the cultural institutions, and the parks. And, just want to shout out to Forest Park. It helped me stay sane, being able to walk the park and just be outside and enjoy nature. And as I look at this whole conversation and the leadership conversations that we've had, people are coming to St. Louis. People are stepping up. They're leading. They're getting engaged. And sometimes we get caught up in what St. Louis is not doing, but St. Louis is doing so much right now, whether it's people who recently moved here, people who have been here for years. There is a renewed sense of pride and energy in this city that people want to be together. People want to be creative and connected. And that's what gives me hope in this work. And it extends to all of our sectors, whether it's an entrepreneur, our students. St. Louis is growing and changing, and I'm just excited to be part of the organization that helps to make that happen.
So as an educator, kids always bring me joy. I mean, that's my North Star when I'm having a bad day. And I think sometimes in my journey, the further I've moved in terms of transitioning to the district office, it's actually situated me away from kids. And so I am intentional about going and finding kids. And, if we're having conversations about kids, I don't think we should have those conversations without kids. And so I try to amplify their voices as much as I possibly can. And anytime I see a student that I was their teacher or their counselor or their coach, and they're doing well, it just fills I'm beaming, like that's my own child, because in some ways they really are. And so I feel like students have always been like my joy, but I am also really excited about all of the good work that's happening in St. Louis. I think we focus a lot on the negative. We focus on what's not happening and, some of the social ills or the challenges that we face. And those things are true to a certain degree. But I also think that there's a lot of great work that is not always highlighted, and that it should be. You know, we should lift that up more. And I also think I'm just encouraged that it seems to be more people who are kind of in that fight of trying to make this region better. And so they're not just observing and sitting back and looking. There are a lot of people who are actively engaged, and then also understand that we are connected and that there are more things that unite us than divide us. And I think that's just been really a pleasant surprise, just to see some things are changing and moving in a really great way in our region.
Well said. I agree. As I think the newest person to this region, I've already seen great change, and I'm truly excited about our students as they grow. I'm excited about all of our arts and culture institutions as they grow. And I think St. Louis has a really profitable and successful future. I'm so excited to call this my new home. Thank you to our guests this evening. You all have been an amazing panel. Thank you for your thoughtfulness and your time and your energy on this Tuesday evening. We are so grateful for you and the work that you all are committed to. It's not easy, like Vanessa said, and it does take time, but I'm grateful that you all are the stewards of the work that you have been called to do. And so I am going to say good evening to all of the amazing guests and the folks who are in our chat. You all are getting applause. I don't know if you can see it from the chat, from folks who are just grateful for your sharing this evening. Thank you for helping us survive. Thank you for helping us thrive. Thank you for helping us shift in our thinking and our disposition and our outlook for a hopeful and successful future. So we say good evening. Thank you for everyone again who has joined us for this year of episodes for Represent STL. And we look forward to seeing everybody in the upcoming season. Thank you and good night, everyone.
Thank you all so much. And thank you to the rep for your leadership. Thank you,
Yes.
Adina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.